Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. I hope you're feeling well and inspired. You might have noticed something a bit different with my opening today. A new tune. I thought it was time to give things a fresh lift with something a little more upbeat. Just because, well, why not? Life's full of change, and sometimes a bit of a new energy makes all the difference. So today, I want to talk about something that's very near to my heart, and I think it's essential for anyone creating. It's the idea of finding flow. It's that beautiful state where everything clicks into place. It's just you, the brush, or more likely the palette knife in my case, and that moment. It's a space where worries fade, the world quiets, and time seems to slip by almost magically. But of course, finding that flow doesn't always happen naturally. And for many of us, it can feel quite elusive, especially when there's so much noise and distraction out there. So today I'll be sharing some insights and tips and a bit of my own experience in developing a creative rhythm, a rhythm that helps me enter that precious flow state and carry through in my work. It's something I think a lot of us struggle with at times, myself included, but there are ways to make it easier and more natural. So let's start with the idea of a routine. Now, I know I always talk about routines, but it really is important. And I'm not talking about anything too rigid or formal. I really believe creativity thrives in freedom. But having a loose routine or even a few rituals you follow just before getting started can make a world of difference in terms of helping you get into that creative flow. So one idea is trying to paint at a regular time, a particular day of the week or a particular time of day. So for me, Friday morning is always painting time. I also think, and I do this myself on that Friday morning, getting into a routine in terms of how you get ready to start to paint can help. So you know that when you enter your painting space, the very first few things you always do. So for me, I sit at my table and I put my big old battered MDF board over it, as that's what I paint on. You can see it in all my YouTube videos. I then get my palette paper. I stick it down on a piece of cardboard using masking tape. And then I get my tools ready. So palette knife, catalyst wedge, flat brush, mop brush, and then I mix my paints. I do these four things every time. And while I'm doing them, I think my mind starts to shift, from day-to-day life and from all the distractions into a bit of more creative space. And I think going further than that, and this is something I always try to do as well, is then take a moment just before starting to paint to become a bit more mindful about your painting intention. So to breathe deeply and allow yourself to be in that moment. It's like an invitation to yourself to stop and step into a creative mindset, setting the stage for what's to come. So that's how I get started. But of course, with our lives so busy, there's always the issue of distractions. So if you're anything like me, you could be 10 minutes in and then your mind's wandering off. Maybe it starts with, oh, I need to refill my paint water. But before you know it, you're then in the kitchen and you're tidying up after your family just before you go back to the studio. Or you're back in the studio, but you're thinking about what's for dinner or what you do the next day. The flow has been broken. Now, we're all human and distractions happen. But sometimes what can help is just to have a little notepad nearby or something on your phone where you can just jot down any stray thoughts that come up. I always write on my to-dos. I'm a big believer in that. And doing that can stop your mind from holding on to them, and then you can come back to your painting with a clearer head. Another thing, sort of around the painting process itself, is setting a specific time limit for painting. That's something that also works for me. Now, you might think that sounds restrictive, but I feel it helps me create focus. And it also, this is an added bonus, stops me overworking things. So I basically tell myself, right, just 20 minutes of painting, and then I can get on with everything else I need to get on with. I find that starting out with this in my mind helps me straight away get focus and stay engaged. And that helps the painting and helps that feeling of flow. Although, I must admit, being honest here, once I'm in the flow, it sometimes takes over and I keep going far beyond that time, which normally leads to lots of arguments because I've told my husband, I'll just be half an hour. And then an hour later, he's telling me, dinner's ready or something. But what about the actual painting process itself? So I think we can do things to nurture flow while we paint too. So for me, flow often starts with those first broad, uninhibited strokes, usually with my really basic plastic palette knife. There's something very freeing about moving across the canvas without too much worry about where it's all going. And if you watch any of my sketchbook adventures on YouTube, you see me doing this all the time. I start by just feeling out the space with loose, sweeping motions, almost like I'm mapping out the emotion of the landscape I want to paint. It's less about getting it right and more about capturing a feeling and a sense of movement. Then, as I layer and add texture, I might start slowing things down. This is where that push and pull comes in, adding paint, scraping it back, revealing some layers underneath. A process really of uncovering and discovery. And this is all part of flow, allowing the painting to guide you as much as you guide it, trusting your instincts and letting that rhythm evolve naturally. So this is something I always do in my painting, and as I say, you can see it on my YouTube videos. And related to it is the idea of managing mental focus during the actual painting process. And what I mean by this is, sometimes when you're working on a piece, there's a tendency to overthink. So you want it to look right. But for example, with my abstract landscapes, I'm not sure there is a right. And if I focus on that too much, I lose that feeling of flow. So instead, I try to think of every mark being a part of the process. Not every mark needs to be perfect. And sometimes it's the unexpected lines and textures that bring the most beauty. So if you find yourself judging too much whilst you paint, just pause, take a breath, and then let your hands lead for a while without overanalyzing. Finally, I know a lot of people also enjoy listening to music whilst they paint and find themselves entering flow that way, and even sometimes painting in time to the music. Now that's worked for me sometimes, but I have to admit, I prefer to listen to podcasts while I paint. I find these work just as well for me. It sort of sets aside my creative time as my time to paint, and my time to listen to the podcasts I most enjoy. And that also helps protect the flow. So I hope these tips help you find your flow in your painting. But before I wrap up, I've got a couple of other things to share with you. If you'd like a bit more inspiration, I've posted another sketchbook adventures video over on YouTube. Now these videos are all about embracing that spontaneous flow, but in a sketchbook setting, which I think is a brilliant way to practice without feeling the weight of a big canvas. And I've also just released a free guide called Ethereal Expressions, Building Depth and Emotion in Abstract Landscapes, which is full of ideas on how to deepen your approach to abstract landscapes and really capture that dreamy atmospheric quality. So if that sounds like it's calling to you, head over to my site to download it. The link will be in the show notes. I hope it will help you get inspired and find more flow in your own work. All right, everyone, that's it for today. Remember, finding flow is a journey, and with a bit of gentle consistency, we will all get there. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, keep that rhythm going, keep exploring, and have a beautiful week ahead.